Okay, so a decent amount of people in the land battle scene. This is for land battles. I don't know much about domination, so I can't speak to it. But a bunch of people in the land battle scene are looking for a build guide or easy builds for beginners or all things like that. And I don't usually know what to tell them. And the problem is I really don't want to record 24 videos, every single patch, 24 factions, so 24 videos of every single faction's generic best build or something like that. And then every patch, it's going to change a little bit. And it's just like, it's really not a good use of my time. It's not something I want to do. But I do want to help a little bit. So I'm going to try and make a video that is timeless. Like, no patch could make it incorrect, right? So how do you make a successful build is what we're gonna aim to accomplish here today, so then you can create your own. And also another problem with that question is there's a lot of generic builds that work because there's a lot of units in this game, there's a lot of factions, and while some units are less optimal, most units in the game function, right? Like there's stuff that's more meta, there's stuff that's less meta, and we'll get into that. Also, if you do have any questions at all, you can go to my Discord. It is linked in the description, and we have a matchup discussion thing right here, where people who play a ton of the game absolutely love to talk about the game itself. Even if you're just playing quick battles, even if you're not playing tournaments and stuff, you can come in here, ask people about what builds you should bring, or you can join our Give Rat Ogre role, and you can become a Rat Ogre, which gives you access to our list of coaches who, for every single faction in the entire game, they are ready to answer your questions. You can send them DMs and things like that. Again, even if you're not talking about the tournament scene, if you're still playing quick battles or whatever, we would love to help you out. So if you end this video and you go, great, a lot of that information was useful, but what if I don't know what units are good on my faction? These people do. They are totally ready to help you. So feel free to hop in, get that Rat Ogre role. It marks you as a new player and gives you access to some of these chats. But anyway, back to the actual thing. So you see all this crap on the left-hand side of my screen. Why is all that there? I took the time to stop and outline every unit type in the game. Type being kind of a keyword, right? Like monsters are anything from manticores to a Dreadsaurian. Wide range. Characters are anything from Archaon the Everchosen to Tretch Craventailed. Wide range. And that's what makes Total War Warhammer such an interesting game for people like me that have played thousands of hours of it multiplayer, thousands of hours of it campaign, and still enjoying it. It is that complexity, but the complexity can make it difficult to get in. But each of these subcategories is generally weak to the same things. Like whether you're a Manticore or whether you're a Dreadsaurian, Rattling Gunners are not your friend, right? Or whether you're a Manticore or the Dreadsaurian, you're probably going to be pretty good at sniping out foot characters. So monsters in general have a role. Cavalry in general has a role, and they can be countered in the same way. Generally. All right? So the categories would be Chaff, which is super cheap infantry. Since I'm hovering on the Beastmen, like Ungor Spearman herds, Ungor herds, maybe even Gore herds. Disruptors, anything that its objective is not necessarily to deal damage. Its role is to stop archers from shooting, to chase down things that are already routing, to break up formations, to be distractions, to pull your cavalry away from your backline, to let something else get into that backline and do damage without the cavalry to stop it. They're annoying. And that would be dogs, harpies, in some sense, Razor Gore herds a little bit. Centigores are more of disruptors. Light cavalry and war beasts are disruptors. Right? Heavy cavalry, self-explanatory. Any cavalry with extreme armor. Monsters infantry like Minotaurs, or monsters all the way up to giants, Cygors, and Jabberscythes. Characters, heroes and lords would be characters. Archers, self-explanatory, but I also would consider weapons teams like Poison Wind Globes. It's archer-like. It is a foot-based, high DPS, low defensive stat unit. Artillery, super long range, slow damage thing that just forces your opponent to come fight you. Skirmish, fast units with low DPS, but they're meant to dodge. Air Force, anything in the air at all. And armored infantry, self-explanatory again, like Chosen, Black Orcs, things like that. All right. Now, why all those are listed is when you're creating a build, there's two ways to tackle learning the game. And the first one I would recommend heavily, and I name it the Black Knight method. Black Knight, if you don't know him, is a high elf player. He's in our community. He's great. We love him. But he has one fucking build. He has one goddamn build that he spams over and over again. And he alters it slightly here and there, but the 99% of this build is the same all the time. And he could win in matchups where you don't think he could win. And the reason that he can win that way is one, he's a really good player, but like he understands his own build very well, and he knows what his units want to do. So even if, you know, something comes at him that's a little bit new, he knows that Illyrian Reavers perform this way. He knows Imric on his dragon performs this way, and he can assess the targets in front of him, and it's like, oh, is that a Foot Herald of Nurgle? I've never seen a Foot Herald of Nurgle before, but I know Imric's stats. I know Imric has better stats than that guy. I know Imric can snipe him out pretty easily if I dive in. You know, oh, are those Plague Drones of Nurgle? Well, I've never seen Plague Drones of Nurgle before, but I know that Imric shouldn't fight them alone because Imric does best in 1v1s or supporting a fight that's already started. Like, things like that. Like, knowing your own units is important. And I do like it as a way to learn the game. So if you create a build with the method I'm about to show you, if you create a build, refine it down, and get this one build that you like, you can play it 10, 20, 30 times until you get bored of it. But then when you move on to a different build, as I mentioned at the start of the video, everything's kind of tied, right? So like in this build, right, if you grab Centaurs and you learn what light cavalry does, and you learn what light cavalry does really well, you're good at disrupting archers, you're good at disrupting dogs, you're good at cycle charging the back line. Like, you know, if the enemy front line is fighting your front line, you can come in behind them and hit them, right? And you know that this unit type should avoid heavy cavalry. You know this unit type should avoid monstrous infantry. Well, when you switch over to playing, let's say you're done with Beastmen, you want to learn High Elves, Illyrian Reavers are light cavalry. They're different than Centaurs by a little bit, but their function, which you have now learned by playing the shit out of one build, it's much easier to pick it up, right? So instead of 30 games with whatever build you create with the High Elves, you maybe need 6 to get comfortable. And then you switch factions again. You're like, you know what, fuck this. High Elves, I learned them, I'm good. Let's switch to Ogres now. Right, and you've played with the unit types before, so I really do like grabbing one build and getting super comfortable with it to learn the game, and then branching out is easier. But like and before, sorry, I know I'm rambling a bit, but I do think this is important. It can be super intimidating to take a look at 24 factions and hop on Skaven. Right, you look at all these fucking units. You slap together a random ass build. You run in, you get your cheeks clapped. You don't know what really happened. You're like, ah man, fuck it, Skaven suck. Kislev, slap a random build down, go into a quick battle. Maybe you win, but it was close. You do it again, you lose, whatever. Fuck this faction, let's go to Lizardmen. Slap down a different faction. Like, you can get so easily overwhelmed and focusing on how to learn what Feral Cold Ones do, what did Cold Ones do, what do Cold One Spear Riders do, what did Ripperdactyl Riders do, what did the Pox Black Horse do, what do all these things do? All right, what do all the infantry do? Okay, what do all the missile infantry? It's like, no, slow down. Take the nameplates off and learn what does heavy cavalry do? Learn that, and then when you take a look at any faction's heavy cavalry list, you can see what makes that faction unique, right? So like Empire Knights are actually just your bog standard heavy cavalry. They don't do that much, but like Khorne heavy cavalry can absolutely kill a bitch. So then you go, oh, okay, I know how to play with heavy cavalry. This heavy cavalry is even better against large targets. Neat, right? And the only thing you're learning there is the even better against large targets. You know how to play with heavy cavalry. So I really don't like when someone who's trying to learn the game keeps hopping around to all these different factions, right? All right, let's get on to making the damn build, the thing you guys came here for. So strategy 1 is the Black Knight method. And this is why we have everything listed. Everything on this list is something you should legitimately write down and do a checklist like we're going to do right now. So this build in front of me is a real Beastman build that if you said, I will give you $500 if you win the next match, but you have to play Beastman and you have no idea who you're fighting, I would lock in this build, right? This thing on your screen as of patch 3.1 is a build I would take. It's a build I like. I don't know what buffs and debuffs are coming in the future for patches, right? Or you're watching this 2 years from now. I don't know what's coming. So let's break down why it exists, and then in the future, if Minotaurs suck, right, let's get rid of them. If Minotaurs suck and Ungor Raiders suck, well, you can cut them from the build, and you know why I brought them in the first place, and what job in the army needs to be filled. Okay. So sorry, pulling up the original build again. So everything on that list on the left-hand side of the screen you should have something to deal with it twice. Okay? It is possible, but I don't think it's optimal to have one answer for something on your roster. Like, if I only have one thing on my whole army that can deal with an air force, right? Let's say you have one thing. You have one single archer, and everything else in your build is melee and on the ground. Well, if you face the Wood Elves and they take 4 Hawk Riders and the Sisters of Twilight or some shit like that up in the sky, they'll see your army. They'll see you have one archer and nothing else. They'll kill the archer, and then you'll lose the game because you literally can't do anything with the Air Force, and they'll pick you off at will. So you need duplicates, right? So if you have 2 things to deal with any concept, it's much less likely that it'll get sniped out, and you'll just lose on builds alone. This is how you avoid build roulette. Something people complain about a lot in land battles, and it's a legitimate concern if you don't know what you're doing. So if you don't have holes in your build, it's much harder to load into the wrong thing. So for Chaff, with the build I have, how do I handle a mass amount of light infantry? And you might be like, well, Chaff suck, who cares? I mean, if they have 8 Chaff and you have like 4, like if they have 8 Marauders of Norskin Marauders and I brought like 2 Ungor Spearmen, those guys are just going to walk over my archers, they're going to walk over my backline, and it'll be annoying. So what do you have to do with Chaff? What do you have to clear out a mass amount of infantry? I have Centaurs with rear charging, if I can secure the flank advantage. I have a Tuskor Chariot. It is a chariot. It's armor piercing, but it's still a chariot. Chariots can clear out a lot of stuff. Minotaurs are very good at clearing out chaff with their high charge bonus. So I have 3 things. I have 3 things to clear out chaff. Disruptors. What do I do about enemy dogs and enemy furies? Right? What do I do about things that want to disrupt my backline? Well, I have my own Centaurs. Light Cav and Heavy Cav are good counters to disruptors. So I have Centaurs. And I have my own disruptors. My own Harpies can catch Furies coming in or something, or they can rear charge dogs with me. So I have Centaurs and Harpies to keep my flanks safe. So, and Centaurs throwing axes you can also throw into melee. So, right, my own cavalry and my flyers can deal with the disruptors. All right, so I have 2, maybe 3 if you consider the throwing axes a different thing than Centaurs. So I have 3 things to deal with disruptors. Heavy cavalry. I have Centaurs with throwing axes, armor-piercing missiles that they can skirmish, so they'll run away from the heavy cav and spam the throwing axes at them. I have monstrous infantry with anti-large and armor-piercing, and the Minotaurs with great weapons. So those 2 can deal with heavy cav for me. Monsters, big monsters, like a Gorgon or a Stegodon or a T-Rex, something like that. I have Minotaurs with great weapons. They have excellent anti-large and armor-piercing. And my caster is a Brave Shaman of Wild with only Traitorkin. I know it's behind the word, but I have Traitorkin. Traitorkin is an excellent single-targeted spell. So I have his spell on my Lord, 2 Minotaurs with great weapons, and I do still have the 2 throwing axes. We mentioned them before. Armor-piercing missiles. Okay, characters. Characters like, let's say there's Sigvald on the field. Well, I still have Traitorkin, so my spell I brought is very good at taking down foot characters. Depending on the character, if they're on horseback or on manticore or on any form of mount, my 3 Ungor Raiders can do good poke to them, and the Minotaurs with great weapons can deal with them. If it's Sigvald, cycle charging with a chariot can do okay, or my Razor Gore herd surrounding him can do okay, or I can throw throwing axes at the character on the ground if they're not surrounded by infantry and stuff. But I'll admit this build is not the best against single foot entity like Sigvald. And that kind of stuff. But also, I tend to think that Beastmen in general don't struggle with that. But that's different. That's the second part of the video. We're still in the first part. I have stuff. I have the Traitorkin, and I have the things I just mentioned. It's not great. It's not great. This build's admittedly not the best against characters. What do I do about enemy archers? I have my own archers to counterfire at them if I really want to. I have Centaurs and Harpies to run into the back line and deal with them. I also have the Tuskor Chariot for just some disruption, but whatever. We'll ignore that for now. Centaurs, Harpies, and my own archers. Enemy artillery. If I can get into range, I have my Ungor Raiders that can fire up over the front line and stop them. I also have Harpies that can suicide over the top line, over the front line and just run into the back line and get rid of those guys. I also have Centaurs with throwing axes, where if the enemy is in a box and they don't have a lot of archers, your Centaurs, or any skirmish cav, right, speaking in generics, can go around the side and then sit outside of the melee range of the enemy, throw missiles at the artillery piece, and if the enemy tries to walk at you to engage you, you are much faster, so you can usually walk away for a little bit, and then when there's enough space between them and the artillery, you loop back in and shut it down, right? So my skirmish cav, my archers and my harpies can deal with artillery. Enemy skirmish forces, foot missiles and artillery are good ways to keep skirmish cav honest, but archers are foot missile infantry are always the best way, I think. I have my own 3 archers to counter skirmish cav if they come nearby. I have my own skirmish cav that is one of the best skirmish cav in the game in melee, also to run out and deal with them, and I have shielded light cavalry to screen them as well. For an enemy air force, I do have 3 archers, and I have an air force of my own with these 2 harpies. And for enemy armored infantry, I do have an armor-piercing chariot. I have throwing axes with their armor-piercing missiles, and I have these razor gore herds with their armor-piercing damage. So this is a good build. I like this build a lot. Yeah, it's nice. It's good. So that all sounded very obvious, right? I'm going to bring up another build that I have frequently brought into Chaos Dwarves and High Elves, and I keep losing. I fixed it since then, but whatever. Sure, that. Oh, this is my updated build. What was the old one? Whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. Easier example would be versus Tomb Kings. I don't have any saved builds for that, do I? Damn it. Okay, not the point. If you focus too hard on clearing out infantry, for example, and you leave out character killing, you can frequently run into the issue where like Sigvald or Archaon or someone like that, or Festus the Leech Lord, or a Mortis Engine can kill your entire army. And it's something that I can get into trouble when I just slap together a build too quickly where I'm like, this can overrun anything, and then single entities happen and I get killed. Yeah, it happens to me also versus Nurgle, because I get rid of all of his demonic units and then the hero squad can kill me off. So there's that. You can do this with any faction, really. Just go through the checklist and make sure you have 2 options for everything. Go to the matchup discussion in my Discord that I mentioned at the very start of the video, and ask people, you know, if you're making a build and you get stuck, right? You're making a build, you get stuck. Let's take out the Tuskor Chariot and the 2 Razor Gore Herds. You go to my Discord and you're like, hey guys, I have this Beastman build. So far, I'm checking a lot of the boxes, but I'm looking at this roster and I don't know how to fucking deal with armored infantry. I've tried taking Bestigors, but their stats are too low and they just lose to all other armored infantry. I've tried taking the Centaurs with great weapons because they have armor piercing, but their stats aren't high enough. Like, I'm just really struggling versus armored infantry. What do you guys suggest? And one of the players in there will be like, oh, chariots are really good versus armored infantry, and Tuskor chariots are some of the cheapest in the game, so I'd get some of them. And also you have armor-piercing dog-type units and Razor Gore herds, and those can be very effective, so they can help you out, right? So if you're going through the checklist and you get stuck on one, or you're not sure about your choice, where you're like, I brought a Lethanar to deal with enemy characters since he's a long-range single-entity archer, is that smart? Because like I don't see him a lot, and then my chat would probably answer something like, Lethanar is very inaccurate and he can easily get obstructed, so he's really not that reliable source of damage, and he's very expensive, so I wouldn't take it. Things like that. So just go through the checklist, make sure you have 2 or more answers for every single thing on this list. Oh, and that's one thing I was going to say about this before we move too far on. If you see a unit on streams that is meta, for example, the Skin Wolf, and you ever wonder why people say something is meta or what makes something meta, a meta unit, usually, not all meta units, but most meta units follow this trait. Look how many things on this list Skin Wolves are good for, right? Chaff. They can clear out chaff. They regenerate. They have really high weapon strength, good melee stats. They have frenzy and physical resistance. They can kill chaff all day. Disruptors, enemy dogs and such. Well, they're still a monstrous unit, so they're really good against enemy dogs and harpies and such, because they have like their mass difference when they hit the charge will do a lot of damage. So they're great for that. They have anti-large. So they're also good versus light cavalry. And again, that physical resistance, frenzy, and stuff comes into effect. So they're good against chaff. They're good against disruptors. Heavy cavalry, they're not good against heavy cavalry. Pass. Monsters, if they get a full surround on a monster with low armor, which is like half of them, they'll trade up. For an only 950 gold, they'll trade up against monsters. So I'll put them under the monster category. Enemy characters. If the enemy character is on a horse, skin wolves are amazing against them. On foot, they're fine, but on a horse, amazing. So I still think they count against characters pretty well. They can get to enemy archers because they have speed like a cavalry unit, right? Artillery, pass. They don't really want to do that one. Skirmish, pass. They don't really want to do that one. Air Force, they got nothing. Armored infantry, they do okay. But on that list of things that you needed them to deal with, they covered 5, maybe 6 of the things you need. So then that's what makes them meta, is because it's never a bad idea to bring them. If you bring 4 skin wolves, they're going to have something to do, right? They have so many functions on the battlefield. They're good at doing so many things that it's really easy to put them in your build no matter what your opponent's bringing. Because what are the odds your opponent, with that example I just went, your opponent only brings heavy cavalry, skirmish, and air force, and then armored infantry on the ground? If that's the only thing they bring, yeah, your skin wolves won't have anything to do. But that build is so wildly lopsided that if you have anything to deal with those types of units at all, you're going to trade way up in value. So that's what I like. You'll see meta units, and it's just because their price point and their function on the battlefield is just so useful, and they're so good at it that it's so safe to bring them, because the odds of nothing being there for them to pay attention to is so stupidly low. So that's why the meta exists. So that's part 1. You pick a build that you made with all those examples. You talk to some people who play the game and stuff, and make a perfect build. Play it several times. Make slight changes as you need to. Like if every game you're not doing jack shit with Tuskar Chariots. Like every single game you play with them, they suck and they die. No matter what anybody tells you, that's fine. Like that shit happens. Cut it from the build. Find something else that did the job you needed it to do. In this case, it was armored infantry, so let's throw in a Bestigor or something. Like, I know I don't have enough money, but I'm not going to redo the whole build just for that. You know what I mean? But, like, cut the stuff that doesn't work, add things that maybe do, but remember what they were in your army for in the first place. So that's how you can do that. Method 2 is more advanced, but it is the next stage. After you kind of get method 1 down, or if you just feel like skipping that step, because fine. When you have a build and you are fighting a faction, and now that you know the game a bit better, you know that Total Warhammer is an asymmetric game. Not every faction is good at everything, and also not every faction even has everything. So let's say you're going to fight dwarves. Well, now let's assess. Dwarves just factually do not have skirmish, because they might have gyrocopters, but I'm going to put that under Air Force. They factually don't have skirmish. They factually don't have monsters. They factually don't have heavy cavalry. They factually don't have disruptors. Like, those are just things you can't possibly have to worry about. So what does that leave you with? Chaff, characters, archers, artillery, Air Force, armored infantry. And even the dwarven chaff is armored, but when I talk about chaff, I mean like dwarf warriors in this example, and armored infantry be like longbeards and ironbreakers and shit. Okay. So now we reassess the build. Out of all the things we just got rid of, what's not needed anymore? Minotaurs are great weapons. The monsters they were going to fight are gone. The heavy cavalry they're going to fight, gone. So I don't need them. Cut them. Armored infantry is fine. I need the Centaurs for some light cav action. Razorgers are going to be great. Harpies will be great. Unger Raiders will be fine. And Unger Spearhunters will be fine. Okay, cool. So I went through the rest of the build. I think I need the rest of this stuff. But the Minotaurs, there's not a place for them. The Dwarves just don't have the units that the Minotaurs are needed for. So you can cut those. And I need to remember what I was doing here. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. So you cut those, and maybe you want more armored infantry killing power. So you get a Tuskar Chariot. Maybe you get the Butchers of Kalkengard. They are a Minotaur, but they're not the Great Weapon variant. They're an infantry killing variant. And they have really good stats because it's the RWAR Butchers of Kalkengard. They have regeneration things and a long fight with the dwarves. You're going to want that. And then you have some extra gold left over, so you cut some units and move them around. So I built one before the stream. So you take that core build we had discussed, and you... Sorry, I lost my train of thought. You modify it as you need. But we're back to the... I believe this is back to the core build. And then when you realize you're fighting dwarves, you cut a bunch of stuff and get more prepared to fight that specific opponent. So that's method 2. Method 1 is like, get a build, and no matter who you're fighting, stick with it. And then method 2 is if, like, you've done method 1 for enough and you feel comfortable moving on, or method 1's just not for you, you can still use the checklist I mentioned at the start of the video to make a build that's good versus everybody. And then when you fight someone, that's where you make your adjustments based on who you're fighting. So for dwarves, they don't have a lot of those things. But another example would be like, if you're against Khorne, you know they don't have, you know, mages. They don't have archers, right? They don't have that much artillery. Like, they technically have 1, but it's really not that thing. You know what I mean? So it's, you alter the core build based on who you're fighting. That's another way of doing it. Now, that way, you'll probably get more wins, and you'll learn the other units on your roster better than method 1. But I feel like method 1 is an easier way to focus on practicing your in-game play. You know what I mean? Because if you spend some of your energy switching your build around and learning new units and stuff, you're not spending all of your time really mastering light cavalry or really mastering archers or mastering any of that stuff, which is fine. I think either way is fine, but I do think that method 2 is a little harder. So, like, hopefully this video was helpful to somebody out there, or you just enjoyed the rambling. I know a lot of people keep asking me for just like give me a build from every faction that's strong or something, and that is just an impossible task. So hopefully this helped you create your own build, I guess. Or again, you can hop on our Discord and ask any of the coaches, or really just anybody. People in our community are generally pretty friendly, and they're not super secretive about what's good and what's bad. Like, they love talking about this shit all day long. So if you hop in, you're just like, what's good? They'll usually pull up a chair, smoke a cigar, and be like, well, let me tell you. And you've got another hour or 2 of people yelling at you on your hands. So, yeah, that's what I got. Roar. Subscribe, yes.